For more, we can bring in France 24's James Andre. James, why is Emmanuel Macron in Lebanon 2 days after this blast?
Well, Emmanuel Macron is there indeed to reassure the Lebanese people. That is the objective. What he wants to show is that France is with Lebanon. And it's true that to a lot of Lebanese Christians, a lot of them are Francophones, France is a bit the big sister country. Now, the core of this message is quite clear in the latest statement made by Emmanuel Macron. That was on the streets of Lebanon as he was speaking to a large crowd of Lebanese people who had assembled there. He said, "I'm here and it is my duty. I want to help you as a people to bring you food and indeed medical supplies. I guarantee that this aid will not go into the hands of corruption." I think that is very much the core message. What Emmanuel Macron wants to show is that France is indeed there, that the objective for France is to control how this aid is used. He comes at the time, you've got to remember, this is just the last accident in the very troubled recent history of Lebanon. For 1 year, the country has been there's been a lot of civil unrest.
It's like a pressure cooker.
It is a catastrophe. The country is in a catastrophic state. There is no cash. Banks have been limiting the amount of cash people can take out of the banks, and that's been going on for months now. The lira has lost, 80% of its value. The situation is extremely bad on all fronts. And this is just the last catastrophe. This is, for the people of Lebanon, for most of them, this is the last proof that their political class is corrupt. And there are, massive mismanagement problems that are so huge that 3,000 tons of explosive were stored on the port, and now there is no port to speak about. So what Emmanuel Macron is doing is coming in and saying, look, France is watching. We want to make sure that there is no mismanagement with this aid. We want to make sure that indeed it will go to the right places. And he's even saying, and he said this in a statement, that he was ready to manage the international relief efforts.
Actually, a crowd on the street of Beirut has urged Emmanuel Macron to oust the leadership in the country. Speaking of Emmanuel Macron's visit, is this something that the entire political spectrum in Lebanon is going to be happy about?
Now, that's very unclear at this stage. Indeed, you can imagine that, as I was saying, this Christian community in Lebanon, which a lot of them are Francophile, are going to be very happy about Emmanuel Macron visiting. I'm not so sure that those who support Hezbollah, for example, are going to be very happy about this visit. Indeed, there are 18 different official sects that are recognized in the Lebanese constitution. And indeed, while France is seen as a friend by some of them, but to cite Hezbollah, for example, not by all of them. So obviously, this is very difficult. We have to see how the Lebanese take this. What's interesting, though, is to note that the history of France, for example, with Lebanon is very different from, for example, Algeria or other countries. What we are seeing here, a French president turning up 48 hours after a major catastrophe to basically say, look, I'm here to manage things, would absolutely be unheard of and impossible in a country like Algeria or other former French colonies.
Where people were out on the streets, remember, in Algeria not too long ago, demanding change, political change right at the top. And yeah.
But indeed, yes, France cannot play that role in Algeria, but it can indeed. It's a very different setup. It's also interesting for France. France has been losing a lot of its influence in Lebanon over the past decades, over the past 15 years. Less and less people are learning French. French is not as important as it was. Schools are not as important as they were. And indeed, well, this is an opportunity for France to come back on the front of the scene. It's also important to note that Emmanuel Macron had been wanting to visit Lebanon for a few months now to organize a state visit and had not wanted to be seen alongside these politicians that, of course, are being extremely criticized right now by the population. It's important to note that there is a real risk of the whole Lebanese society breaking down and exploding over this, because obviously for a lot of people this is acute proof that there's something very, very wrong at the top of the state and that there is massive corruption. So it's important to stabilize the country. It's important to reassure people. And this is what Emmanuel Macron is going to do. Question mark, is it going to work? We'll have to see. But he is going to give a press conference at 5:30 Paris time.
Thank you very much for that, James. James Andre there.